Morgen. Morgen, Luca. Akne? Also ich weiß jetzt nicht, was das heißt. Sorry. Muss mal testen. Der Ton sollte eigentlich gut sein. Ja, möchte ich mal rüber zu Acid Tony. Ups. Und der Ton sollte trotzdem weiter sein. Noch kurz was einfügen. Audioverstärker. Ich jetzt so leise. Hi, Killermaski, was geht? Nur gerade dabei den Ton auszutesten, aber ich glaube, es sollte jetzt funktionieren. Okay. Oh, endlich geht's mal weiter. Mit dem vierten Fall im zweiten Spiel. Irgendwas mit dem Ton nicht gut sein sollte, einfach Bescheid geben. So. 2nd November. 3:38 p.m. Shams Sweet. Still can't quite believe what just happened. I know, I inquired if the bailiff of the court session was adjourned. It seems Mr. Virgil was taken to hospital to recover. Oh yes. Right. 10 years ago now, Mr. Virgil attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the window of the prison governor's office. Okay, das wurde irgendwie nicht so richtig deutlich. Ah, okay, er wollte sich umbringen, weil er irgendwas falsch gemacht hat. Oh, shit. Okay. But ever since then, he's completely blocked the memory of these events from his mind. Nobody knew his secret, not his family, not even the man himself. But I forced it out into the open. Was it wrong of me to do that? Did I overstep the mark, I wonder? Bruno! What? Oh. Oh, Iris? You were miles away. Anyway, I've prepared a fresh pot of soothing tea for you. Oh, thank you. You and Susie have had an exhausting day so far, haven't you? Ja, auf jeden Fall. Oh, thank you, Iris. Thoughtful of you. Do you happen to know where Mr. Holmes is? When we came out of the courtroom back in the defendant's antechamber, he disappeared. Oh, no, I don't know. He just suddenly sprang to his feet and left. All he said was, I must leave. I wonder if he's pursuing the mystery of Inspector Craxton's death. Well, you know what Hurley's always saying, don't you? There are mysteries in this world that should perhaps never be solved. But the construction of a solution comes only at the expense of the destruction of something else. What does that mean? He knows very well that when you open someone else all at once, you often open your own too. Ja, das stimmt. But he just can't take his own advice and leave well alone, so the mystery is too important to him. Yeah. That's so true. But that's what I like about Hurley after all. I suppose that's the lot of a great detective in some ways. So then, let's have tea. And then I will give you a hand. Oh, do you have time, Iris? Yes, I finished this month's manuscript at least, with barely a day to spare before the deadline. Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. A brand new story to read in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Yeah. Now, you know, I always hide Hurley's violin in the days before I have a deadline. You do? Poor Mr. Holmes. I'm sure that's very wise, Iris. What sense of you? Now then, my dear fellows, let's make a plan of action before we continue our investigation. Okay. Wat lenen? So, how did it go in court this morning? Well, we still don't know the truth about what really happened, but one thing increasingly clear. Lord Van Zieks definitely didn't do it. Oh, goody. Yes, that's right. We managed to uncover several new facts as well. Oh really? There was another development too. Kazuma. Yes, it's quite clear now that Kazuma-sama is not himself. The way he's acting, it's almost as if he is possessed. I know. I mean, at the end of the proceedings earlier, it was like a bloodhound the way he was chasing down Mr. Virgil's forgotten past. He's not normally so mercilessly persistent. What's going on in his head, I wonder? I really need to sit down with Kazuma and try to understand what he's going through. If Gregson was really murdered the day before his body was discovered, then Lord Van Zieks has to be innocent, you see? What? The day before? Well, that should be easy enough to work out. Just by examining the corpse, really. Yes, you would expect so, but curiously, no time of death was included in the autopsy report. That is curious. There are still unanswered questions about Lord Van Zieks, though, aren't there? What do you mean? I mean, what was he doing there on Fresno Street that day, in the first place? Well, according to the man's testimony, he said he was investigating Inspector Gregson, didn't he? And it turns out that little room was actually the inspector's secret office. Oh, that sounds like it has all the makings of a wonderful developed plot. But then why was that notice board in there covered in all those particular papers? Papers about cases with the link to the Reaper. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this. Oh dear, that sounds more like something horribly devilish. We must start by looking into Inspector Gregson's movements of late. Gregson's movements. I never imagined I might have to be investigating an inspector's movements. Well, according to the entry in his diary. He was carrying out an incognito investigation of the red-headed leak the day before his death. You mean he was doing the same as Hurley? Well, Mr. Sholmes was trying to apply, whereas the inspector was supposed to investigating. I do wish it had been the other way around. Anyway, as it turns out, the inspector who went to investigate the red-headed leak that day wasn't actually Gregson at all. It was Mr. Virgil, in possession of Gregson's identification. You know what it sounds like to me? Establishing an alibi. Oh my, yes, you're absolutely right, Iris. But why would Gregson need an alibi? It would appear that the inspector had something to do with the wish to keep a secret. I don't believe it. I ever thought he was just a harmless lover of fish and chips. But perhaps they were seasoned with something a little more potent than salt and vinegar. I think perhaps we should try to move away from food analogies. Well, anyway, if Van Zieks felt the need to investigate Gregson, yes, I agree. We must try to find out what he knows. Mach mal. Virgil, you say? Isn't that the name of the lady who came to visit Hurley yesterday? That's right, to ask Mr. Sholmes if we would help her to find her missing husband. Only Mr. Sholmes completely passed the buck to us. Actually, the news said that Mr. Virgil had been taken to hospital. Do you know which one? It's St. Sinners. I'm starting to wonder if all the other hospitals in London have closed down. But that's amazing, you know, you found the lady husbands already? Yeah. Well, I suppose I have, by accident. And 10 years ago, while Mr. Virgil was the chief warder at the prison, he was responsible for the professor's incarceration. No. So, when the convict escaped, he was held responsible and immediately dismissed. Sometimes I really don't want to grow up. There's more. For 10 years after that, while he was ostensibly working as a peddler, he also had another secret job. He was paid by Gregson to be a stand-in, to impersonate the inspector. To impersonate Crexy, but why? I have absolutely no idea. Yeah, Jeannie was right. I'm starting to think all adults are up to no good now. Including you know. I haven't paid anyone to impersonate me. That means he has ties to the professor and to Inspector Gregson though. So I do think we ought to pay a visit to Mr. Virgil, don't you? Back to Sentinel then. Well, I think it's clear that we need to do, isn't it? Let us investigate, my dear fellows. Oh, Iris, you're even more enthusiastic than usual today. If anyone has anything to hide, my special Wilson shooting iron will soon set them straight. That water pistol? It's stuffed full of a piping hot extra special blend of mine. Uh-oh. I'm quite sure it will be very effective. Oh yeah. I will better be careful not to hide anything. Well, it feels like strange that Mr. Sholmes is nowhere to be seen, but still. Let's go and see what we can find out. Yes. Okay. Erstmal dahin wahrscheinlich. Second November, British Supreme Court, Lord Chief Justice Office. No arguments, Prosecutor Asogi. You will continue with the trial exactly as I instructed. Is that clear? Perfectly. It's Kazuma-sama. Fine, not stronger by the sound of it. He never did know when to back down. On our way now, Asogi. My lord. Kazuma? He left without saying a word. Yes, what are you doing here? I was just hoping to ask you a few questions, if you wouldn't mind. I wanted 1-6 trial concluded today, but Prosecutors Asogi's unwelcome inquiries are going to make it take longer than necessary. Unwelcome inquiries? As a result, I'm losing even more precious time. Currently 2 hours, 55 minutes and 41 seconds, 42, 43. Then we must resolve everything before 3 hours have passed, Mr. Naruto. In a miraculous not even 5 minutes? Anyway, I can't let the man's obvious bad mood put me off. I need information. Ich brauche Information. Does Prosecutor Asogi believe that Lord Van Seeks is the Reaper? I wouldn't know. It was 10 years ago, in that fateful close trial, that Lord Van Seeks made a name for himself among the judiciary. But the next trial he fought, he lost. Mead, the ringleader of a criminal organization, was acquitted, thanks to all the jurors being under duress. But that's awful. The man's freedom was short-lived. He lasted just 3 days. Yes, let me see. He died in the rockslide at his place of work, I believe. Correct. That was the inauguration of the Reaper of the Bailey. And people believed Lord Van Zieks was responsible? He was brought to try himself, but it was shown to have been an accident. So he must have had a solid alibi then. Nevertheless, the mysterious death continued. In total, 16 persons perished in unusual circumstances, possibly at the hand of the Reaper. That's a long run of coincidence. Yeah... Well, the Reaper's strategy may well be revealed by this trial. And the impact that the revelation would have on the British Republic cannot be understated. Is that why it's a closed trial? Precisely. Closed trial. This country hasn't seen a closed trial for 10 years. The last one was the professors, the trial of Genshin Asogi. Correct. Actually, we heard that originally you were going to prosecute the trial yourself, Lord Strongheart. Van Zieks entreated me to relinquish the prosecution to him, that he might avenge his brother's death. And there we are, 10 years later. With the son of the man Van Zieks had condemned now looking to avenge his father's death in the same way. They do say that what goes around comes around. However, it would seem that the new young prosecutor is harboring some ulterior motive as well. Kazuma is... I like my organization to run smoothly in the exact manner that I prescribe. As with the giant clock in here, I won't tolerate a single cog being out of step with the others. Ah, so that's what all the gears are about in here. If the young man refuses to mesh with the other parts of my great machine, I will be forced to take steps. What do you mean? Not something with which you need to concern yourself. In any case, all your questions will be answered tomorrow. Oh man. Now, I shall have to ask you to excuse me. As of this moment, I've been delayed from attending my next meeting by precisely 3 hours. Oh my, that is a long time. And I hold you entirely responsible. Even though my miraculous managed to fit everything into not even 5 minutes. I wonder if you might agree to us, talking with Prosecutor Asogi. Discussions between the defense and the prosecution outside of the courtroom are generally frowned upon. However, I will make an exception in this case. Now go. You can find him in his office. Oh, thank you. Let's go to see him at once, Mr. Naruto. Kazuma's my best friend in the world, but I'm really not at all sure I know how to talk to him at the moment. Okay, gehen wir mal hin. 2nd November, Prosecutor's Office. So, this is the office of Prosecutor Asogi now, is it? Kazuma-sama is doing so well for himself. Even though he always forced to kneel on the floor, Japanese style in the dark corner, it is a habit to sit Seiza style whenever he's working. Well, it looked like our journey here was wasted. The prosecutor appears to be out. Perhaps we should discuss things with another prosecutor we know first? Okay. Dann ab ins Gefängnis. 2nd November, local prison, cell 1. Lord 16 is reading. Look. He doesn't seem like he wants visitors, does he? But he must have noticed that we are here, surely. Hello? What do you Nipponese want? That's no way to greet a lawyer who's trying his hardest to prove your innocence, is it? Perhaps not. I apologize. So, what can I do for you, Mr. Naruto? Lord 16 speaking earnestly. Oh, the fog will lift over London for the first time in months tomorrow. This does feel very, very strange. I must say, I was impressed. Oh, well, thank you. Not by you, by your fellow Nipponese. Your prosecutor friend. Oh, I see, yes. It's sardonic, don't you think? For a man such as me, so loathing of the Nipponese to be entirely at the mercy of the two of you. I suppose it's retribution for having played the part of the Reaper all these years. Played the part? What? You once told me that you gladly allowed people to believe you were the Reaper. Because it helped reduce the amount of serious crime that took place in London? If keeping quiet and playing the part benefits the cause, a cause I myself am committed to pursue. Then why would I choose to say something? But the henchman of a criminal killed by the Reaper attacked you only the other day. Anything? No. And that was just the most recent of many attempts on your life, wasn't it? Someone is clearly profiting from your silence about all this. Someone is using you. Believe me, ever since the Reaper first appeared, I've been doing my utmost to expose him. Or rather, expose the organization. It's a whole organization? It's inconceivable that all those accidents were orchestrated by one man. No, the Reaper always appears to have very accurate information about the accused in each case. Which can only mean that somebody at Scotland Yard is involved. Somewhere at... You can't mean... It's taken me many years, but I finally identified the central figure in this Reaper organization. Tobias Gregson. Nein. Was? No. Gregson, the Reaper? Also. So, the reason you were investigating Inspector Gregson is because you intended to expose him as the Reaper? As I said, the Reaper of the Bailey is not a single person. It's a highly secret organization with close ties to Scotland Yard. But there's no doubt that Gregson was a key member of that organization. I don't believe it. Are you saying that Craxy, that he was behind all this awful criminals meeting there? Gregson didn't do the dirty work himself. Oh. He was the tactician. His job was to probably investigate the marks and plot their assassinations. In order to do what without a reasoning suspicion, he regularly needed a firm alibi. Which is where Mr. Virgil came in, posing as the inspector? Virgil knows nothing of the Reaper, but the room he rents on Fresno Street was almost certainly the headquarters of the operation. Gregson would have met the assassin there for briefings. So we don't actually know who carried out the killings then? Actually, I do have a name. You what? Well, if you can name the man, you have the true identity of the Reaper already then. Or, if I can name the woman. Oh. She's a young woman by the name of Asa Shin. Wait, what? Shin? Ah, stimmt, es war die Frau. Ja, ihr Name. Miss Asa Shin. The true name of the terrifying killer I know only too well. She came to Japan posing as a visiting student and murdered Dr. John H. Wilson. Then, just when it seemed to a diplomatic protection would help her escape Japan and the conviction. The mysterious woman was herself murdered in a small summer beach hut. And that woman was actually the Reaper of the Bailey? Mr. Naruto, this perhaps isn't the place to discuss. No, of course not. You can't mention it here. The fact that she killed Dr. John H. Wilson, because Iris doesn't know, and it's very likely that the man was her father. Assassin? I should let father know at once. Yes, I agree. Kazuma, isn't it? Kazuma Sogi. You say he is a friend of yours? My best friend. He's the whole reason I got to come to Britain. It was all on his merits. I have nothing but respect for him. Yes, I understand that only the very best students are selected for such opportunities. And I had a fine demonstration of how sharp he is in the proceedings earlier today. He missed nothing. In fact, his flawless performance very much reminded me of his father. Genshin Asogi, the professor. It's true that the aristocracy in the time was the root of the numerous grave societal problems. They were abusing the power, playing with the common man as pawns in politics, in economics, in war. In many ways, Asogi was carving out a canker from society that we British couldn't deal with ourselves. Ah, I see. But that's precisely why it makes no sense. Clint von Seeks was a noble and upstanding man. He wasn't corrupt. Why did that damn Nipponese have to go and take my brother's life? In spite of having once saved mine. He saved your life? How did that happen? It was 10 years ago, on a foggy night. What was to be the professor's final strike had sent a wave of panic to the capital. So Clint von Seeks had already been killed at this point then. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. Of course, at that point, I had no idea of the true nature of the man at my side. All of a sudden... Don't make a peep, you're coming with us. We were surrounded. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. Clint was not only from noble heritage, he was a brilliant prosecutor as well. The scum of London hated the son of him, and they had no sympathy of this younger brother either. I'd been targeted several times before already. Yeah, someone thinks they're right, we've got him. I could hear them murmuring amongst themselves. I knew they were after me. Just when I thought my time had come. If I let them kill you, Clint would never forgive me. It was Asagi's voice, just a whisper in my ear. After that, I don't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He had shielded me. 2 days later, they arrested him, on suspicion of being London's most notorious mass murderer ever, the Professor. How awful for you. All at once, I lost the brother I revered and the foreign friend I held in such high regard. I'm so sorry, Lord Van Six. That's the end of my miserable tale. Never thought I would recount it to anyone. Well, thank you for confiding in me. The Professor, the Reaper, and Inspector Gregson. I wonder just how intimate related they all are. I still can't quite believe that Gregson was essentially the Reaper, giving assassination orders to Giselle Brett. Listen, let's go inform my father. I'm sure our government will want to hear about this new information. That means I get to meet you, Lady Susie? Hooray! Yes, alright. Let's head back to the Great Waterloo Hotel dann. Nachdem ich mir kurz was geholt habe. Bin gleich wieder da. So. Back in November, Great Waterloo Hotel foyer. Saw it yesterday and I think it again today. The place is so princely. It's a wild guess, but I have a feeling you will think the same tomorrow too. Maybe has a finer fragrance than wherever they are. During the tea room, they thought, wouldn't you say? Ah, look who we have here. It's an unexpected pleasure. Ah, father. Oh, is this your daddy, Susie? How lovely. What a charming young lady. And you are? Ah, really? So you're the author of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, are you? That's me, Iris Wilson, at your service, sir. This has been a wonderful friend to me over the last year, you know. Well, Miss Wilson, I must say I read your work regularly and with much interest. Iris actually lives with Miss Holmes, you know, father. Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some way to explaining the bright look in your eyes. You wouldn't be smiling so early if you knew just how bright she is, believe me. Now then, young Naruto, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee of the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery after I twisted some arms. And I must say, it was a truly exemplary performance. Oh well, thank you very much. Although I'm fairly sure you omitted by Kazuma on the end there. No, please don't misunderstand. It was you who impressed me. Really? You didn't miss a step against Asogi, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured into such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary. It's very kind of you to say so, and really nice to hear. What I saw in court today confirmed that I've been hoping for. The favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruto, I trust you haven't forgotten? No, you did mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report, father. Of course. Shall we take in the tea while we discuss matters further? I wonder where Judge Shikoku has got to. About the Reaper. Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper of the Bailey? I've heard rumors some members of the Judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was visiting a student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge. Word, it didn't appear until after the case, when the visiting students had already returned home. Lieutenant Six, who was in the dock today, that was Barak, the younger brother of Clint, was Six, I believe. That's right, and he knows throughout London the Reaper, as you have heard, but the truth is, it wasn't him. Beyond all of this mysterious death, it was somebody else. Hi Okang, ja, das Spiel ist momentan nur auf Englisch. Ist halt leider so, aber ich glaube die ersten 3 Spiele von Ace Attorney, also Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, die Trilogie ist sogar auf Deutsch noch rausgekommen für die Switch, aber das ist momentan nur auf Englisch. Aber es geht, also es ist machbar, es auch zu verstehen. Manchmal. Es gibt zwar ein paar Wörter, die ich nicht mehr aussprechen kann, aber es ist verständlich. I see. What you're saying is, there's been a professional killer at work here. Exactly. Someone by the name of Assassin, in fact. I beg your pardon? Did you say Assassin? You mean the Giselle Bread woman who was responsible for killing my great friend? No, a friend of yours was killed? Oh no. Professor Mikotoba, I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right now. Because the friend of the professor is talking about is Dr. John H. Wilson. And that's not something we want Iris to find out about. Not like this, anyway. Oh no. I've just remembered something. Biscuits! This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits. That was rather out of the blue. She's doing this deliberate. Genau, so ein Wort kann ich nicht aussprechen. I think I will go and see if I can purchase some. I wonder, would you like to come too, Iris? Oh yes. I just tried to leave me behind. So that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she? Yes, that's right. And she's the author of those adventure stories starring the great detective shows. But the name of the credited author isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson. Yes, I know. That's the name of her father, you see. Her father? Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all of the kindness he showed me during my time in London. That's why I was keen to reciprocate and invite him to the Imperial Chume University 4 years ago. But he was murdered last year by Giselle Brett. Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about the case, but it seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father. Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. But I think I can say with some certainty that he was never the great detective's partner. So, it could have been another Dr. Wilson, you think? Well, John and Wilson are both common names after all. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure. That's what we thought, yes. We are back with cinnamon biscuits. Oh, they smell delicious, Iris. I think cinnamon will go very well with the tea they serve here, don't you, Susie? Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris. I haven't seen Judge Shikoku for a while, have you? Guilty! Yeah, but that guilty is still ringing my ears. No, now you mention it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since the symposium opening was postponed, he will have gone to explore at the Great Exhibition. That reminds me of something you mentioned. Es ist schon sehr textlastig. Ja, man muss halt ein bisschen Informationen sammeln, aber dann gibt es halt diese Gerichtsfälle oder manchmal mit Sherlock Holmes so Deductions, bei denen man halt ein bisschen halt Beweise zeigt oder mal seine Meinung ändert, aber im Gerichtsfall ist halt mehr, du versuchst halt durch die Aussagen von Zeugen, durch Beweise, die halt zu widerlegen und halt die Story voranzubringen. Es ist halt schon sehr textlastig, aber mit eigenen Gameplay-Elementen. Aber momentan ist halt eher so Untersuchungen, Gespräche und erst später kommt ein bisschen mehr Gameplay. Genau. Aber es ist trotzdem gut, wie es halt gemacht ist. Ich mag das halt auch so ein bisschen textlastig. Ist halt eine andere Art Spiel. Ja. Ja, aber es wird noch interessant. Es ist halt momentan nur viel Text. Aber es wird dann im Gerichtsfall ein bisschen besser. Man muss halt sich an dieses Gameplay halt mal gewöhnen, wenn man die Ace-Turnierreihe mal spielt oder mag. Aber gern geschehen. What Judge Shigoku having once been in the dock himself? Ah yes, it was all tied up with the accursed trial. The close trial of Kazuma's father. Seishiro was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and actually managed to break the witness stand. Oh my. He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire, for which he was charged. Oh dear, although it's very easy to imagine him doing that. Well, it was all alright in the end. He was acquitted, and we returned home to Japan together. Thank goodness. Ah yes, talking of Seishiro. I have a copy of the photograph we all took together. Here yesterday, please. Nice. Oh, what a lovely picture. It certainly seems to show we have arrived in Britain. None of us had any idea what was coming when we took that, did we? No, no, that's so true. So you mentioned a favor that you'd like to ask me? Well, this fateful trial that you're fighting, one way or another, it will be over before long. And by this, I'd like you to accompany me back to Japan. You want me to do what? Father, what's the meaning of this? Now, Susato, you should understand. You have seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judicial system is in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense. You mean the Supreme Court of Judicature is in desperate need of a good defense lawyer, as soon as possible. Really quite urgently, in fact. But I've not even been in London a year yet. I've read all of Susato's reports. I'm well aware of your extraordinary talents. And having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there's no question. You, Naruto, are precisely the man our country needs. So, you believing then? No? But then, what am I supposed to do, Father? You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant. Oh, yes, she's supposed to be Kazuma's assistant. Our government is still in the process of deciding how best to deal with the situation, though. You have always chosen your own path, Susato. And I trust your judgment. Das matter also. Father. Please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand? I hope, if I'm honest, but I won't force you. What I ask is that you consider it and come to a decision by the time this trial concludes. Yeah, yes, alright. You won't leave, will you, Runo? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Up until now, I've just been trying to do what I believe to be Kazuma's will. That it turns out that he's still alive, so where does that leave me? Well, if you excuse me now, I need to telegram government ministers and the Japanese police with this information about Asashin. Of course, Father. Thank you. I look forward to next month's installment, Miss Wilson. Oh good, and please do come to Baker Street sometime, won't you? Love to entertain you. I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruto. And give me a suggestion of your full consideration, won't you? Yes, I will. Going back home. You know, Kazuma-sama has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he would love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all of this. Yes, no doubt. Asashin. Of course, it's so obvious. Oh, how could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? Mr. Sholmes? Hurley, where have you been? Why, I joined all of your tea, of course. What an extraordinary question. I didn't notice you at all. No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns, Mr. Naruto. Yes? I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once, as it's a matter of much urgency. To Japan, you mean? Tell me, to whom can I trust the task? Quickly now, who? Well... my father has just now left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau of Japan himself. I see. Well, he looked reliable enough for a bearded fellow. I don't think what father sports could be considered a beard, Mr. Sholmes. And there's not a moment to lose. Kindly ask you to trust the unshaven father to see this is sent. I will, but what is it? No questions at this time, if you please, Mr. Dotto. All we can do is pray that for once, my deduction is Ari. Doesn't it imply that your deductions are normally correct, Mr. Jones? Which isn't exact. No, then. You may be surprised to learn that I've been a very busy man. I certainly have no time to hide behind status and airdrops on other people's conversations. So that's what joining us for tea means. I leave the sending of this in your hands then, my dear fellows. Wait a minute, Mr. Jones. Just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace, and left the unpaid bill for his tea behind too. Yeah. I must catch up with father at the telegraph office at once. And I will run and call us a cab straight away. Whoa. And there was me thinking everyone would be clamorous to pay Mr. Jones' bill. Muss ich jetzt zahlen? Oh man. Und erstmal zum Langhaus. No, 2nd November, Zanzibar's Hospital. Ward 3. This is the ward where Mr. Virgil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Hi. The lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Virgil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm so sorry to have caused you to... I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things you would obviously try to forget. The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago too. He just missed him. Kazuma beat us to it. He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself. Please, don't think like that. Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Jackson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could do to help. But perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Virgil all along then. I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but it wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it's true. Oh, Mr. Virgil. I'm sure you would rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but if possible, would you tell us exactly what really happened? I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about. The Reaper's smarts, yes. It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him. You would pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf? Oh no, never. A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. What I would do is go to the specific location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression. Everyone there would think A detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident? Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lima Street for the Red-Headed League event. So as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters? Yes. So you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification and generally being loud? That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes. Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though. And as you know, I suffered his bruising around my neck at their hands. No. But the following day, they kept their word and released me. Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however. We had arranged to meet in the Fresno Street room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the time, that's when I heard the gunshot. It was at midnight on 17th June 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it? Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Berkeley was renewed for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception, or rather, one notable loophole, something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct? Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would await at the adjourned room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the cemetery to find a long coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin when nailed it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut. No! I don't think anything of it at this time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived. So you mean the coffin contained... Yes, I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery. Presumably, there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long. In the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free. But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder? I'm afraid I really don't know. I can say which cemetery are two things. So he couldn't possibly even have escaped that way without help from somebody working in a prison. I do think that. And that somebody was not me. And that somebody, ja, das glaube ich jetzt. Obviously, you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi. Yes, I remember him well. In fact, would you mind telling us what you know? Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After the trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity. The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it? It was a time of delicate diplomacy when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potential disabling case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly. The man had less than a week in total. There was the chief warder. I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredibly resilience. What do you mean exactly? He was a killer for many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he had done, so I asked him one day, those 5 members of the aristocracy who lives were taken. Are you really responsible? I'm guilty of the unforgivable crimes of ending another human's life, yes. The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise. Guilty. That night, when he was brought back to the cell, I saw something unusual. Something unusual? What? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. Okay. As I said, it was on the night following this trial, after he had been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand. His last will and testament then? Presumably? As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incineration, you see. What sort of conditions? Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception. Really, he was allowed his things? That is unusual, certainly. Of course, he had been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy, but at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers had that we were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And what was the exception you mentioned? The personal effect he was allowed? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper. So, he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him? Yes, that was the long and the short of it. I have no idea where they obtained the paper, and writing materials would have been confiscated from us upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back, then he pleaded with me. Why did you just hide behind your back? Please, turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline. But, you know, it's against the rules. You are the only person who's seen. You just agreed to keep quiet. Alright then, but what's on the paper? The last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. How can a will be a weapon? I decided to pretend I see nothing and I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without trace. What do you mean, it vanished? It would seem that isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will. Ist doch im Gefängnis geblieben? Oh. It was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but somehow it disappeared. It was after Asogi's execution. Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak. The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see. To poor Kazuma-sama. And you are saying That it wasn't anywhere to be found among the personal effects. The will, I mean. That's right. Though I didn't search the suit by myself. By Governor Caden was lured, he was screaming. I can have disappeared completely. That doesn't quite make sense though, does it? In what way? Well, you have to understand that only Mr. Virgil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it? Oh, yes, you're right. I really don't know how he knew. It certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as the will. What he said was the Asogi's papers. The Asogi papers? I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened. Your dismissal and the way you blocked it all from your memory. I've forgotten all this until now today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case though. Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Virgil. We are very grateful. I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly, but I do hope I don't appear rude, but... No, not at all. Thank you again. But what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested. So sorry. Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come. Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Virgil. Before you go, there's just one thing. Yes? What is it? The Asogi papers. I would be very grateful if you would make no mention of the things I told you about them. Presumably for some good reasons. It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. It became known that I would remembered. Well, could be rather troublesome, I think. I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape? There's anyone who might know more about the document that Customer Fathers left behind? It would be Mr. Virtue's governor. Then we know precisely where we must go, back to Berkeley Prison. Ja, gehen wir hin. Da. So, 2nd November, Berkeley Prison, Governor's Office. Ah, back again, are you? Yes, hello. I've heard all about your investigations. I read the report just now. You have found him, huh? Virgil? Yes, luckily. Well, anywho, the lady doesn't work here anymore, so you guess not to do with Berkeley. I would not like you to get the wrong idea about that. Of course, yes. Mr. Virgil stopped working here 10 years ago now, so... Yes, we have seen his dismissal notice, haven't we? He was given the job. Aye, Kimmer, you can very well, so how about a handcuff biscuit? Oh, there really are like little handcuffs and as hard as irons too. So, what brought you down here today? Well, there's something else we would like to ask you about, actually. Is that so? We believe there might have been a document that disappeared from Gretchen Asogi's cell. I think it's been called the Asogi Papers or something. Did I know say? Gregson's death is not to do with things that might have happened at Barclay. Leave the past in the past, lady. Let's not further with irrelevant details. The expression changed completely. We're clearly onto something here. 10-year-old legacy. That murder's botched execution and the whole miserable escape. They were Barclay's darkest hour, a shocking embarrassment. Because the convict had the collaborator on the prison's death, you mean? For shame. The coroner who confirmed the death of the man after his execution, Courtney Scythe. And my chief warder at the time, Virgil, who was in charge of the whole affair. But Mr. Virgil says he didn't know anything about it. The Vasca wouldn't say otherwise, huh? More handcuffs? Oh, how could I say no? You can never have too much iron in your diet. When Mr. Virgil was handed his dismissal notice as a result of what happened, he was so despairing, he jumped out of your office window, didn't he? I didn't like to say, but that's just Virgil trying to get out of it. Do you know, think he wouldn't have jumped from the shock of his crime as being exposed, so I do. You wouldn't say otherwise though, would you? Of course I can have shown all responsibility myself. I shouldn't I have let him deceive me. Sure. Actually, there really anybody that kens what meant on the time now. We, Gregson, having been murdered, and Dr. Thies forbidden from having any visitors. No visitors? Someone obviously doesn't want her giving anything away. Well, we're not going home empty-handed. And I wouldn't dream of sending you packing a note. Come here, take a handcuff or two. Oh, well, it would be rude to say no. Wouldn't want to become anemic. I suppose if there's anybody who might still keen about what happened back then, would be the last from the forensic division, Maria Corey. Maria Gorey? Aye, Si's daughter. She didn't have no more, just the one. But the wee bairn followed in the man's footsteps. Did I ever see her without a scalpel in her hand? Ah, said die eine. Mama, what is this? Where did she spring from? And did she just call the doctor Mama? Dr. Say's daughter, Maria Gorey. You couldn't do with talking to her. So, she's Dr. Say's daughter, but her surname is Gorey? Aye, her some family history, I'm sure, but I didn't ken the ins and outs of it. She grew up watching her mom working with the bodies of folk who died in strange circumstances, and deceived to do the same with her own life. I can understand it myself. Perhaps she was driven by a deep respect for her mother? Perhaps. Anywho, she was in charge of Gregson's autopsy, I believe. Right, and the coroner responsible for the incomplete report. Someone told me once that the wee lassie always loved her mom's stories about cutting up bodies. There even a rumor that she used to listen to the funeral march as a lullaby. Well then, perhaps her mother might have told her about the history from the case 10 years ago. I would say there's a fighting chance at least. After all, it was a life-changing case for all of us. We really need to speak to Miss Curry herself about this, I think. Well, thank you very much. I'm no happy about any part of it. It took years for Londoners to finally forget the whole professor business. You now give up on this, laddie? Stop asking pointless questions. I'm sorry, I don't like dragging up these painful memories for everyone. Can you not just stay away now? Leave me alone and didn't come back here, huh? How do you come too keen about that, laddie? There's no many folk even here in the prison who have heard of these papers. Well, I can tell you Mr. Virgil told me. I'm afraid our sources must remain confidential, sir. Huh. You have been led to believe the papers are actually a last will and testament, is that right? The professors, or rather, Genshin Asogis. Aye, that's right. Oh, you are well informed, Jimmy. Oh, is that the end of the silent treatment? But then after the convict's execution, it mysteriously vanished from his cell, didn't it? Heavens no, you are off a half-cock there. I think you didn't quite get your facts straight. It was there in the cell, exactly where it should have been. Oh, not what we heard elsewhere. Let me just have a wee hook around in here. I'm sure I can find it. Ah, here you are. See? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi, written with a calligraphy brush. Of course, I cannot read the word of the Japanese scribbles, but in mind it says he leaves all his worldly possessions to someone back in his homeland. Yes, that's correct. That's the gist of it. So these are the Asogi papers? Aye, of course there are. Papers written by Asogi, no doubt about it. There's no mystery here, laddie. That's our lot. After all this damage of the slices of an execution, we sent the man's possessions back to his clan in Japan, and that was the end of it. I think we ought to make a record of this, Mr. Naruto, just in case. How many weapons I have left? One thing of you're going right, Mr. Naruto. Ja, was wir das gut zu machen. Last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. I, Genshin Asogi, hereby requested upon my death, any and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London be delivered to my son. Hi, der coole Boy. Hi. Hi, was geht? Was geht ab? Was geht ab? Das wird alles okay. Bei dir? Okay, bin nur ein bisschen gerade am Vorlesen. Ja, auch super nice. Ist doch gut am frühen Morgen. Ups. Das wollte ich eigentlich lesen. I, Genshin Asogi Herbie, request that upon my death, any of and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London are delivered to my son Kazuma Asogi in the Empire of Japan. It is with deep sadness that I accept my fate in this foreign land, in the knowledge that I will never see my homeland or family again, but I regret nothing about my chosen path. Oh shit. Okay. One thing above you go away, Mr. Naruto. Yes? Those papers are not to do with Grayson's death. I would prefer it if you don't make no mention of them outside this office, or rather... I would not just prefer it, consider it an order from the highest level of our government. I understand. Okay. Dann gehe ich mal. Hallo? Hallo? Ah, jetzt geht wieder. Mal was machen. Okay. So. 2. November, Prosecutor's Office. Ah, ist wahrscheinlich da. Kasuma. I thought it wouldn't be long before you paid me a visit, Yunosuke. I was right about what I said, wasn't I? Sorry. That you have all the makings of a great defense lawyer. Uh, well, I always believed that you would fulfill your dream of advocating in the British courts. I never imagined for 1 second that it would be as a prosecutor. Seeing you stand in the foreign courtroom, so gallantly releasing your dream, Kazama, I'm truly happy for you. And I'm truly thankful to you, Judicial Assistant Mikotoba. Yosuke, I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisaged it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate. I've learned a lot of things during my time in London. About how Susato-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with the judge Chikoku. And about what happened with your father. Oh, das geht mal weg. Then you will have no difficulty understanding why I had no choice, why I had to find a way to get to Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma. As you wish, Yosuke Naruto. Your disappearance. It's getting on for a year now, since what happened in the SS Buria. We're heading across the oceans from Japan to Great Britain. When a bizarre series of coincidences led to those tragic events. I thought I had lost my best friend forever. I must have been unconscious for a long time. When I awoke, I was lying on the bed. I was in a narrow little room. There was no posing of flowers by the pillow. It took me a little while to realize that I was in the cabin of a ship. I slipped out of the room and headed up onto the deck. Were you already suffering from amnesia at that point? Yes, I didn't know what had happened or where I was. There was just this voice in my head. You have something you have to do. Something no one else can know about. Go to Great Britain. The task awaits you there. It was a calling I couldn't ignore. It compelled me relentlessly. Out on the deck, I saw that I was on a huge steamship and we were docked in a large port. Must have been Hong Kong. Yes, I must have been, presumably just before they were due to carry your body off the ship. I had no idea of the situation, but I did have the feeling that this was in some way my last chance. So I concealed myself among the disembarking passengers and went ashore. I disappeared into the crowded streets of that foreign port city. so I could plan my onward journey to Great Britain. Just under a year ago, with all my past memories lost to me, I was left behind in Hong Kong. Everything was foreign to me. The sights, the sounds, the smells, my head reeled. I was truly at a loss. I realized now that I escaped as a dead man, with nothing but the clothes to my back. No money, of course. Oh, how terrifying for you. Luckily though, I had two feathers in my cap. One being your knowledge of English, I suppose. That's right. And on the back of that, I was able to pick up some work as a deck hand on a cargo ship. Eventually, after calling at countless ports, I finally arrived at Dover. That must have been some 3 months ago now. Your formidable tenacity of purpose showing itself again. I mean, the man had lost his memory and had literally nothing to his name. But he still managed to make his way to London and the opposite side of the world. Of course, I had no idea why I'd move heaven and earth to get there at the point. So, how did you end up becoming Lord Van Sieg's apprenticeship then? That can only be called an extraordinary stroke of luck, really. You see, I was stopped at the border cause I had no papers. They took me straight to Scotland Yard. And by sheer coincidence, Lord Strongheart was there to attend a meeting. That's when the second feather in my cap came into my play. Would that have been your knowledge of the law? Yes, exactly. Lord Strongheart was curious about an Easterner with intimate knowledge of British law. He took me back with him to the Supreme Court and assigned me to the prosecutor's office. And then, 9 days ago, you finally got your memory back after the trial involving Drebber? Yes, I did. Ever since I first met you at Yume, you talk about your dream. Mark my words, Ryunosuke, I will be chosen as a visiting student and make my way to Great Britain someday. Did you know the entire time what happened to your father here? 16 years ago, when my father left on the exciting trip to Great Britain, I was just a boy. We took a photograph together the day before his departure. My last memory of him. What I remembered most about my father is his unswerving sense of justice. 6 years after he left, a gentleman called out our family home. He told me that Genshin, my father, had been taken ill in England and passed away. It was Professor Mikotowa, your father, Sudato-san. Oh my. Ever since then, the professor was very good to me. He even helped to fund my university education at Yume. I'll be forever in his debt. But nevertheless, I just couldn't bring myself to believe what he told me. Oh. Then one day, a letter arrived at our house from Britain. There was no indication in this letter, so I opened it, knowing it was from an old acquaintance of my father. What I read in the letter changed my entire life. What did it say? It said that my father had been a mass murderer and the writer cursed the Asogi name. Oh no. As a result of that letter, I found out what had been hidden from me all these years. A letter from Britain. Presumably, the letter was sent from a relative of one of the victims. If whoever it was had been a member of the judiciary, he could have been present at the closed trial. The letter revealed that my father had been sentenced to death, executed for being a killer. I'm so sorry you had to find out that way. If imagine the British government did its very best to silence whoever sent that letter. Someone who knew the truth and couldn't bear the resentment was always got to be a problem. But still, it could have been written by anyone. Why would you believe such a thing? There was a newspaper cutting included with the letter. It was the first I'd ever heard of the professor and his terrible killing spree. Well, what did my father have to say about the letter? I couldn't bring myself to show it to him. Why not? Because he deliberately concealed the truth from me by telling me my father was taken by a fatal illness. That couldn't have been easy for him, and he'd done it out of consideration for my feelings. So instead, I showed the letter to Judge Chigoku, to the other visiting student. He faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he just laughed the letter off. But in that moment, I saw it on his face. He was undeniably shocked, shaken momentarily before recovering his poise. A year later, my bereaved mother succumbed to the strain of grief and she too passed away. That's when I made up my mind, then one day without fail. I would cross the seas to Britain and seek the truth for myself. The truth about my father, Genshin Asogi. And I wouldn't let anyone stand in my way. Oh, Kazuma-sama. Oh man, oh man. What we learned today turned things completely on their head. It was an impressive piece of lawyering, Minosuke Naruhodo. Lord 16 isn't the Reaper, you know. I almost don't want to believe it myself. But it turns out that Inspector Gregson himself, the victim, was. It's clear that the Inspector was behind the Reaper's activity all along. What? You mean you knew? The real question is, who's been giving orders to the Inspector? Yes, Barak 16 is the real Reaper. And I know that 10 years ago, it was him. He decided my father must be a mass murderer and sent him to his grave. No, he was merely seeing that justice was done as the law dictators. He's not to blame. Ultimately, it's people who condemn people. The law is just a tool that they use to do it. And when a man condemns another, he must take responsibility for his actions. Of course he must. But I knew for certain that my father would never have taken another man's life. Kazuma. On the contrary, my father's life was taken by the Reaper. Ah, shit. So, warte mal, zeige ich Ihnen jetzt das hier. Kazuma, what do you make of this? Okay, dann doch nicht. Auch nicht. So war's das? Okay. What? A scale model of the crime scene? Ah, yes, I realized that. Does the prosecution office make a model of the scene for every single case? Apparently so. Sometimes it helps to visualize things better and notice things you hadn't thought before. Actually, the miniature notice board is my work. To be honest, you enjoyed making that. Und wenn es da jetzt nichts mehr zu sagen gibt, dann... Dann würde ich mal sagen, wir gehen. Nee, das gibt es nichts mehr zu zeigen. Okay. Dann gehe ich mal irgendwo hin, wo ich noch nicht war. Fresno Street. 2nd November. Room of Fresno Street. Aber ich glaube, hier gibt es nichts zu finden. Nichts mehr Neues, okay. Oder hier? It turns out that Gregson didn't actually die in here at all. Where on earth could he have been killed? Well, one way or another, we must find out. For the inspector's sake. You know, you look awfully pale again today, Mr. Naruto. Ah, sorry. When you start thinking it all through, I conjure up some horrible images in my mind. Imagination is the culprit here then, most certainly guilty. Okay. Warte mal. Ich will nicht diese Tochter besuchen, aber... There are details of cases stretching back over the 10 years on this notice board. Yes, a history of not 160 defeats in court. I think it's a bit description. Although, when you consider everything on the board, it's certainly true. That all these people had the background of dubious dealings. The end, of course, the board itself concealed the inspector's own death. Oh my, it really doesn't bear thinking about. Okay. The photograph of Mr. Virgil. Okay. Nochmal ins Gefängnis? Ah, warte mal. Vielleicht nochmal ins Krankenhaus. Vielleicht ihm das vorzeigen, wenn es geht? Mehr nötig. Nee, anscheinend nicht. Will ich ihm das vorzeigen? Was that? Ah, it's just something I was hoping to ask your opinion. Okay, nee. Muss ihm doch was vorzeigen? Report? Nee. Came up in. Ach so, oh ja. Tried it as something a little dubious, I mean. fact that no time of death was recorded on Inspector Gregson autopsy report. Yes, there were some unexpected turns in the courtroom earlier. The suggestion you came up with certainly took everyone by surprise. The idea the victim died the previous day at some other location is quite something. Well, considering when the pocket where it stopped and the scorch marks on the candle, it's certainly a distinct possibility. The evidence and the scene both point to it. To be honest, it bothers me too. Hi Kira, guten Morgen. Ja, dachte ich bis gestern auch. Dann war ich gestern auf der Arbeit und da haben sie mir gesagt, ja, bleib lieber erstmal die Woche zu Hause, weil es muss erstmal Arbeit vorbereitet werden für nächste Woche, damit andere Mitarbeiter, weil ein neues System eingerichtet wird, halt die Arbeit machen sollen. Und dass ich halt nicht die Arbeit für sie halt vorher mache. Deswegen sollte ich halt zu Hause bleiben. Ja, habe ich glaube ich auch geschrieben, irgendwie, ich habe versucht es irgendwie dir dann zu schreiben, aber ja. Heute Phasmo? Warte mal, spielt ihr heute Phasmo? Bevor wir Phasmo spielen, können wir das vorher bitte nochmal ausprobieren mit dem Mikro? Ich glaube, ich habe es umgestellt, also ich konnte es umstellen. Könnten wir es vielleicht vorher ausprobieren? Das wäre ganz lieb. Und wann wollt ihr spielen? I paid a visit to the autopsy room earlier. The coroner responsible wasn't there, but I got the name. It's Dr. Gurry. Aber auch im Stream oder einfach nur so? Was relativ früh. Wird glaube ich eh nicht so lang. Also ich hoffe mal, es geht nicht mal so lang, das was ich jetzt spiele, dass wir das dann vorher nochmal austesten. It wouldn't trouble you, Customer Sama. I would very much like to speak with the coroner too. Of course, the last thing I want is for anything to be brushed under the carpet. Scotland Yard's autopsy laboratory is beyond Logate Cemetery. Also du meinst den Test um 14-15 Uhr? Oder? Nee, warte. Ja, okay, dann mit Stream. Ich dachte jetzt, ihr wollt um 14 oder 15 Uhr anfangen, da habe ich vielleicht irgendwie falsch verstanden, okay. Ja, alles gut. Also heute Morgen habe ich auf jeden Fall Zeit. Ich möchte halt hier noch ein bisschen Progress machen und dann könnten wir das mal kurz ausprobieren, bevor wir das machen und ich hätte wieder Bock zu spielen. Auf jeden Fall. Und zu viel ist auf jeden Fall ganz lustig. Und hoffentlich ohne irgendwelche Störgeräusche. Aber ich konnte es in Phasmo konnte ich mein Mikro aussuchen. Hast du eben gerade auch wieder Autos gehört? Das ist ein lautes Autogeräusch oder ein Fahrzeuggeräusch? Wenn nicht, dann nice. Dann funktioniert mein Mikro echt, das Programm echt gut. Nice. Aber genau, es gab ja auch ein Problem, als ich mit zwei Kumpels gespielt habe. Da hat sich das Mikro von dem einen schlecht angehört, also komisch angehört, in der Lobby. Als wir beim Spiel waren, gab es keine Probleme mehr. Vielleicht kann es sein, dass irgendwie zwischen Lobby und Spiel irgendwas anders ist. Was meinst du mit Unterschied? Ich finde, bei mir hat man einen größeren Unterschied als bei dir. Meinst du größerer Unterschied mit besser oder was meinst du? Ah, hi Luca. Ja, wir können später mal, wir können fast mal durchgehen, wir können mal Broadcast durchgehen. Können wir gerne machen. Ich guck mal, dass ich irgendwie so weit komme, bis zu einem bestimmten Moment und dann können wir alles mal besprechen. Ich habe den ganzen Tag Zeit heute. Ja, okay. Und ja, das ist die Laboratory is beyond Logate Cemetery. Logate by Berkeley Prison, you mean? Ah, you know it, do you? The prison where my father was incinerated and robbed of his life. Customer Summer, Well, thank you. We will pay a visit to the laboratory later today. Jetzt. Mir geht's ganz gut. Ich wollte eigentlich erst noch im Stream bei dir vorbeischauen, aber ich habe ja selbst mit einem Kumpel noch was gestreamt und ich war halt so kaputt von der Arbeit. Dann bin ich einfach sofort ins Bett gegangen und hab gepennt. Naja, ja, dann das nächste Mal. Nice. Ja, eigentlich ist nicht mal so. Ja, dieses eigentlich. Yes, okay. I want to thank you. For what? For this. You safeguarded the soul of the Asogi clan. Well, it is a famous sword that's been in your family for generations. My only slight regret is that I never got the chance to draw it before I returned it to you. Karuma is said to have been forged by a master swordsmith during the Sengoku wearing states period. I come from a long lineage of warriors, many of whom were expert swordsmen. Well then, you had of the old block, I would say. This blade, Karuma, is a symbol of the Asogi clan's honor of might. Apparently, one of my father's apprentices have took the blade's name for a surname. Will you Karuma? It sounds formidable, that's for sure. 16 years ago, when my father was a visiting student here in London, we had this sword forever at his side. Which is why it means so much to me that I have to be at my side again now too. And that is all thanks to you. It was an honor. Now, I have preparations to make for tomorrow. Perhaps I said a little too much. Ja, sie ist eigentlich... habe ich auch immer bei so einem Drehlehrgang gehabt, dieses eigentlich sollte man nie was sagen oder so. Sollte man nie wirklich sagen. Kazuma, you have changed. No, it is okay. I haven't changed at all. It's you who's changed. I can completely understand your resentment of Lord Van Seeks given what happened. But the fact is, those events in this case are, well, unrelated. Is that what you want to say? How can you be so sure? What do you mean? Never mind. That man is the Reaper, and it's for the reason that the Inspector was killed. Oh, Langeweile, okay. Das ist blöd. Aber vielleicht kann man demnächst wieder Switch zocken. Mario Kart oder so. Haben wir vielleicht für sonntags geplant? Hoffentlich hat man noch genug Art zum Ablenken. I'm going to prove as much in court tomorrow, but whatever means necessary. I can't let you do that, Kazuma. Ja genau, du hast ja gesagt, dass wir sonntags immer sowas machen könnten. Wäre eigentlich ganz cool. Auf meiner Karte habe ich irgendwie immer mehr Bock. Ja. Ja, alleine, ja, kommt immer auf das Spiel an. Du hast ja recht. I know you will do what you have to as a lawyer. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that I won't be taking any prisoners in the courtroom. I would expect nothing less. Ah, Ark, stimmt. Stimmt, Ark. Das wollten wir auch noch austesten. Until tomorrow then, in the Old Bane. Und falls du das testest, Kira, mit Ark, sag Bescheid, vielleicht kann ich ja auch mal da beim Testen mithelfen. So, jetzt gehen wir mal zu dieser... Zu Psycho, die mich aufschlitzen wollte. Mal sehen, wie es hier geht. 2nd November, Forensics Laboratory. This place really is creepy, isn't it? Well, being in that room, it's probably full of the spirits of the dissected. But actually, There's a rather pleasing scent of roses in the air. Well, being in that room... Ah, Maps, nice. Ja, ich würde auf jeden Fall das mal auch mit austesten. The coroner probably needs a bold scent like that. Must the odor of death. Iris, do you think we could change the subject? Oh no. Da schärft jemand ihre Klinge. What was that? Hallo. Ah, Dr. Gore? What? That noise before? I was sharpening my tools. I would be dead meat if I didn't keep a perfectly clean edge on them. Right. When following the collect fibers in the dermis, an expertly sharpened scalp cuts like cheese. Would you like a demonstration? Oh, yes, please. I would love to see. Then I think you will do nicely. No, I wouldn't do nicely at all. I mean, maybe some other time. So, was it a sat? Well, we came here to ask questions, so... Oh shit, die will mich aufschlitzen. We have actually met before. I'm a lawyer, if you remember. You're not dead yet. What? So Mama said I wasn't to cut you open. She's so strict about things like that. Well, good. The size has some scruples at least. Oh dear. It looks like she's not interested in talking to us. The time being, anyway. The time being? You mean until we die? I hope that's a way off. Sorry, but I wasn't planning on dying anytime soon. Surely there's some less drastic way of making her listen. Ja, irgendwas muss ich doch zeigen können. Was vielleicht? Could I ask your opinion about this? Anscheinend kein Interesse. Vertagung, we actually came here to ask you about this. He was very good. Good? Sorry. His skin didn't snag my blade once. A very little mess. His joints dislocated easily and his muscle tissue was a pleasure to work with. We can skip those details. But there's one thing about the report that's caught my attention. You don't seem to have recorded a time of death. That's not my fault. That made me jump. Then please, tell us what happened. So, why doesn't this autopsy report include the victim's time of death then? Really, it's the most crucial detail. It was told not to write it. What? By whom? Miles Strongheart, the Lord Chief Justice. He came here. Lord Strongheart came? He said that from the written statements about the gunshot and the other evidence, it was obvious. The man clearly died at 5 PM on 1st November, when the gunshot was heard. But that's the time of death you wrote in the report. You didn't write it anyway. Sie ist, warte mal. November, warte mal. Man clearly died on 5 PM on 1st November. Warte mal, 1st November? Ja, sie ist halt die, wie nennt man das? Die Leichen aufschneidet und untersucht. Und deswegen darf sie das anscheinend. Was there some reason you didn't include it? Dr. Gurry, if you're hiding something under Lord Stronghold's instructions, then sooner or later you are going to go the same way as your mother. Give it here then. Huh? She's scribbling so furiously. There. You have written what she's written? Tell us. Interminate us indeterminate. Okay, ein Moment. Das heißt unbestimmt, unklar. Oh, ernsthaft? But the details of the auto report, yeah, wow, Alter. The accurate estimation of the time of death is not possible. Wow. What do you mean by that? Why was the time of death indeterminated? When the specimen was brought in, it was still fresh, so the time of death could easily have coincided with when the gunshot was heard. But there was one small discrepancy. What discrepancy? There was some fried fish in the pocket of the specimen overcoat. And that fish had started to rot. What? If the victim liked fried fish, he presumably liked to eat it before it went off. Well, yes, what are you really trying to say? It's possible that someone tried to manipulate the apparent time of death. Manipulate the... Is that even possible to do? Theoretically, if you were to chill the body in ice, you could delay the one set of purification. And if the overcoat wasn't on the body at the time, then only the fish would have started to rot. To today's science, it's not yet possible to determine if the body was chilled or not. But today's science is advanced enough to let you freeze a corpse, it seems. But surely, to chill a corpse like that would require an enormous electrical refrigerator. I don't imagine many households in London are equipped with such a device. No, definitely not, but maybe in a factory or some other special places. I don't recall seeing any factories or such like on Fresno Street though. I wonder if the inspector body had been chilled somehow. What might the actual time of death have been? I couldn't say for sure. The most, it might have been a day earlier. What? Huh? In other words, it would corroborate your previous deductions, Mr. Naruto. That Inspector Gregson was killed a day before his body was discovered, at a different location. Did you inform Lord Strongheart of this possibility? He simply said that there were no electrical refrigerators of the size in the vicinity. Okay. Oh yes, one other thing. It's something that the governor of the Berkeley prison told us. He said that your mother, Dr. Thies, was responsible for confirming the death of the professor after his execution. The professor? What? Apparently, you always enjoyed listening to your mother's stories about her work, so we were wondering if you might know something about what happened 10 years ago. It's not all, Mama did. Mit Spiele meinst du eher Multiplayer- oder Singleplayer-Spiele? Die Sache, was du, wenn halt Lust hättest. Oder was für ein Genre, also was dir halt am besten gefällt. Egal. Ähm, äh, muss ich mal überlegen. Ja. Eher auf der Switch oder am PC? Hm, lass mal Foto ausprobieren. Immer die Frage. Ist Entspanntes, was man während dem Stream gucken kann, spielen kann, oder irgendwas, was man wirklich mäßig vertiefen muss? Dann Mama did. Was macht mir Spaß? Okay. Civilizations vielleicht oder das neue Spiel. Also kann Humankind. Will ich auch mal spielen, auch so ein Strategiespiel. Ich gespielt habe, Deep Rock Galactic. Ist auch so ein Zwergenshooter-Spiel. Auch ganz nice. Kannst du sehen, was wir da gestern Abend gespielt haben? Wenn du willst, auch irgendwas wie Mass Effect oder Dragon Age, wenn du ein bisschen Roleplay-Gaming haben möchtest. Es gibt halt einiges, was man machen kann. Monster Hunter zum Beispiel. Monster Stories 2, was ich gerade spiele, auch manchmal im Stream. Sorry. My mama carried out the autopsy of Clint Van Seeks as well. What? Really? The brother of Lord Van Seeks, the professor's final victim? The idea of carrying out an autopsy on a member of the aristocracy was a completely unthinkable back then, but the detective in charge of the investigation insisted that it was miraculously authorized. That detective being Inspector Braxton, of course, quite an accomplishment for one man. That autopsy provided the vital clue needed to arrest the killer. And Mama was there for that historic event. What does all this mean? You know, that amazing autopsy happened right here in this very room. The professor and Clint Van Seeks. They both spent the final moments before the burial on that searching table there. Warte. Von den Spielen, die ich gerade lese. Lego-Spiele. Das nächste Star Wars-Spiel ist ja dieses Skywalker-Saga, würde ich auch mal gern spielen. Und spielt ihr wirklich Borderlands? Habt ihr auch Borderlands 3? Ich hätte wieder Bock, das zu spielen. Mama's Lab was instrumental of some sort of country's most important events. Einen zweiten, okay. Der dritte, da gibt es auch manchmal Rabatte. Ja, aber ich glaube, es gibt immer wieder gute Rabatte bei Borderlands. Über Steam. Und Borderlands ist nice. Also Borderlands macht auf jeden Fall Spaß. Auch alleine. Natürlich ist es auch eher ein Koop-Shooter, aber alleine geht es auch. Ja. He really is proud of her mother. Ja, es kommt ja auf den Charakter an, den du spielst. Ich habe immer den Gunner, den Turrets genommen. Gibt es jetzt nicht momentan Summer Sale oder war der schon? Ich weiß es gerade gar nicht mehr. Ich glaube, der war schon. Necromancer, ja. Stimmt. Und wenn ihr halt den dritten Teil euch holt, ich wäre mit dabei. Ich wäre dabei. Und am dritten Teil ist es auch gut, auch wenn einer vom Level her höher ist und ein anderer gerade anfängt, kann der eine oder der andere mit der anderen dieselben Missionen machen. Also einer ist der Host und der andere wird halt vom Level her so eingestuft, dass es keine Vorteile gibt. Das finde ich eigentlich auch ganz cool bei dem Spiel. Ja, genau, die tolle Stimme. Ja, war schon nice. Hm. Spielt Santas nicht? Ich würde, glaube ich, das nochmal spielen auf jeden Fall, so ab und zu. The professor's execution was Mama's first big case. She had to be in attendance at Beverly Prison's execution chamber and signed a certificate to confirm the convict's death. Mama's the best coroner in the world, you know. I was so proud of her. But the execution didn't actually take place. No, and worse still, Mama actually helped with the jailbreak. I didn't want to know. Oh dear. Also, okay. Also ich bin auf jeden Fall Borderlands-Fan. aber jetzt kann man auf jeden Fall so ab und zu spielen. I believe in her, in Mama, but now I wonder if I'm starting down the same path as her. Und das Gameplay vom 3er ist auch besser, meiner Meinung nach, als beim 2er. You mean because you omitted the time of death on this autopsy report? But it's because Lord Strongheart forbade you from including it? Just like Mama, I'm sure she was cursed by somebody too. Yes, that's my feeling as well. There's no doubt that there were powerful forces at play 10 years ago. The execution could have been stacked with a lot of people at the prison knowing about it. Obviously, the prison governor must have been in on it as well. The big man with the little handcuffs, according to what he told us, he was tricked by the chief warder. He says he knew nothing about it. Of course he said that. He would say the same thing. Just who was behind the jailbreak all those years ago? You mentioned the autopsy of Clint Van Seeks. It was at a time when carrying out autopsies of murder victims was very unusual. It's still not a practice that observed in our country even now. Moment, hatte die Tür drin, ich spiele gleich da. So, wieder da. Ja, man muss sich halt irgendwie das Spiel halt gut aussuchen, keine Ahnung. Das muss halt anliegen. Ja, so viele Spiele. Vielleicht findest du ja noch was Passendes. Und Solberg habe ich gleich auch mal aufgetestet, aber irgendwie war es nichts für mich. Und Satisfactory müsste ich mir mal genauer angucken. Na gut. It turns out that he was the professor's final victim. And when the autopsy was performed, Mama was present, although only as the secondary assistant. The person leading the procedure was called Dr. John H. Wilson. What? Ja, arg. Es sind ja so viele Spiele, die wir spielen wollen, ey. Das ist heftig. Ja, wir werden es irgendwann bestimmt machen. Bestimmt schaffen. That's right, my daddy. Oh, stimmt, Urlaub. Warte mal, wann hast du es nochmal genau? Weil ich fliege ja auch für eine Woche am 10. September weg. Hoffentlich dann nicht, während ich in Spanien bin. And there was one other person present, the primary assistant. He was a visiting student from the Far East. Ja, okay, dann ist gut. Wait, a visiting student? Must have been my father, Juchi Mikotoba. I had no idea Professor Mikotoba had been involved in something so important. Ah, dann passt es ja von der Zeit, ja. Dann ist gut. Was the discovery of a vital piece of evidence that led to the capture of the professor. So that's how they came to identify Genshin Asogi as a infamous mass murderer? Do you happen to know anything about that piece of evidence? Can you tell us any more? Would you like to see the records of yourself? Would that be alright? What's the point of keeping records if people can't look at them? They are filled under V in the back of the cupboards with the other records from the last decade. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. 1-6. 1-6. That's strange. What, Mr. Naruto? They aren't here. There's nothing under 1-6. There must be. Perhaps somebody took them away? No. No one's allowed to take documents related to the professor case out of this room. But you're right. They are gone. Well, when was the last time somebody looked at them? Do you remember? It was... Oh yes, I remember now. It was 2 years ago. The consulting detective came one day, saying that he would like to see the records. No, you don't mean... Sherlock Holmes was his name. Deep down, I knew that was coming. Do you think he stole the records? No, surely not. Iris, that can be right, can it? Iris? What? Bruno? I hope you don't mind, but... What is it, Iris? I've just remembered something very important I have to do. I'm going to have to leave you now. Oh, that's very sudden, Iris. Well, we'll come with you then. No, there's no need. You and Bruno can take your time here. Bye for now, then. Good luck. Wait a minute, little girl. Me? I remember now. You have been here before, haven't you? Have you, Iris? Yes, 2 years ago, when the detective came. You were with him, weren't you? You were a living specimen then, too. That's the way it usually works, yes. What was I? I really don't remember. Anyway, sorry, but I must dash. Wait, Iris. I will brew up a pot for you when you got home. What's the matter with her? She's behaving really strangely all of a sudden. Well, in that case, we won't keep you any longer either. It's been quite a while since I had any visitors. This was really fun. But next time you come, I will prefer if we are ready for the section. I can't make any promises, sorry. It's a bit strange that the records of Clint Van Sieg's autopsy have disappeared. But I think we have asked all we came to ask now. Was ist denn mit der los? So, wo geht's denn jetzt hin? Gefängnis? Oh, er ist nicht da. Oh, wow. Fresno Street? Ah ja, 2nd November, room on Fresno Street. The police are still busily investigating in here then. But she does nowhere to be seen. Where is she? Yes, it has been blissfully quiet, hasn't it? Perhaps she's out investigating on her own, practicing with what her boss taught her? Well, I expect she'll be back before too long. Shall we wait? Actually, there's something different about this room since the last time we were here, isn't there? We could always use the time to investigate more thoroughly. And this little trunk wasn't there before, was it? Oh, it appears to be made of metal. It must be very heavy. I wonder to whom it belongs. There's some initials on the outside, look. TG. Let's ask one of the policemen if they know it came... Warte mal, TG. Ah doch, Tobias Gregson. Oi, what do you think you're doing? This is my trunk, that is. Ends off. Gina, where are you hiding? I don't know, you leave something unattended for a few seconds and every Tom, Dick and Harry's got his greedy eyes on it. Just a wild guess, Gina, but... What? Spit it out, Otto. It is fair to say that you have only owned the trunk since this morning's trial. What are you trying to say? Come on, this trunk goes with me everywhere, always as we have been at last year. Trying not to incur your wrath, mainly. Ja, dann hol dir erstmal Frühstück. Hab ich auch nur mal kurz hier was gegessen und wird dann später was zum Mittagessen. Oh nein. Ja, das kommt vielleicht irgendwann noch. Per Knopfdruck kommt dann das Essen. Der Affen, der das dann selbst aufisst. Okay. You stood here them talk in the yard now. They should be ashamed on themselves. Ja, okay, genau, oder so ein. They're saying that it was the boss who killed all them blooders. You mean the whole Reaper thing? Yeah. Apparently, the boss was investigating stuff that no one else at the yard knew nothing about. Stuff to do with all the criminals who got off scot-free. Yes, the ones persecuted by Lone One Sikhs he used probably in corruption to evade conviction. Well then, obviously, it was that blooming Reaper given the orders, wasn't it? But why would people be suspecting Inspector Gregson of being involved in the killings? There was a notebook in his office. Oh no, this doesn't sound good. It adds details about all the crimes that have been packed as the Reaper's work. What? No, did you see it, Gina? Did you see that notebook? They wouldn't, flaming at me, cause I'm just an apprentice apparently. But it was me who found it, and it was my boss. That's right. I was pretty miffed about it, so I sneaked a peek and held it straight away. Oh, das ist Gina. Und was stand drin? So, you managed to see what was written in Gregson's secret notebook anyway, did you? Well, I see it. It's my right to read what. And what had you written, Gina? Dates, times, places, names, and a long list of them. All details about the bloodshed supposed to have been done by the Reaper. But there could be an explanation for that. Perhaps it was the record of the Inspector investigations of the Reaper's activities. Exactly, that's what I said. That's the first thing you would think, right? As it happens, it was full of names I recognized anyway. Well, the Reaper's targets were almost exclusively known leaders of London's criminal underworld. Well, yeah, but there was one name right at the end that was a bit odd. At the end of the list, you mean? I'm pretty sure the date against it was 31st October. Oh, the day before the inspector was found dead? So what is the odd name? Warte. It went like a name I've never seen before. It was something like, nah, it's no good. I can't remember it. I don't think it was an English name, put it that way. Oh dear, what a pity. There was something else too. I don't know if it matters, but the same name kept coming up over and over. Shin, it was. Don't suppose it means anything, but... Did you say Shin? What does it mean, something? Lord Van Seeks knew the name too. He mentioned her as well. The woman who actually did the deeds. And now, he found out her name appeared in Craxton's secret notebook? No, man. We haven't seen you for a little while, have we, Gina? Well, of course not. I've been busy, and I'm investigating in that. The lads in the yard are trying to trace the boss movements the day before the pant. Day before... that would be the undercover investigation into the red-headed league then. Only the boss didn't go, did it? You found some cuff what was pretending to be in, didn't ya, Otto? Yes, it was Mr. Virgil who actually went to the park in Limb Street that day, posing as Craxel. Well, anyway, you aren't the only one turning stuff up. I've got my own ways of getting results. Oh, when me and my partner got together, there's nothing we can track down. Oh, little Toby, he's such a faithful friend. So, have you traced anything down then? What do you think, huh? Of course we have. Can't tell you though. Police business, innit? Anyway, the point is, if you not ever need any help, you know who to turn to, right? Me and the Elrond here. Right, because he looks oh so hellish, honest. The Hellhound. Gina, about your Hellhound there. Chief Inspector Toby, you mean? The pride of the force, yes. In Japanese, police dog means something quite different, and not altogether nice to those involved in crime. But there in Britain, it's a wonderful compliment, it seems, for a canon at least. Should be, after all, in the great exhibition case the other day, it was Toby here who managed to locate Trevor's workshop. Maybe it's time for another demonstration of what this superdog can do, huh? Do we have something the Chief Inspector could catch the scent of, I wonder? Okay... Bringt das hier was? Das vielleicht. Well, ich bin back to Toby. If you wouldn't mind having a sniff on... might be a little too keen, don't you think? The Chief Inspector made short work of Gina there. Ich hab was richtig gemacht. Oh look, what's this gone to? Oh my, the Tranquilly still has a very strong stand. Of Inspector Craxton. In other words, it must have belonged to him. Alright, it's a fair cop, I suppose. And you nearly got away with it too. You always talk to the party of Chief Inspector, Toby's nose and what it can achieve. Did not cross your mind that he might identify something that was right next to us? Yeah, that was a bit of a bloomer, Randall. That's enough of now then, Gina. I think it's time you told us the truth of the drunk. It went like that, it just ran. What are you talking about? I know what's going through that head of yours, but that ain't what happened. Alright then, what did happen? Well, like I said before, we were trying to trace the boss's movements. So I let Toby wear a whiff of his boss's overcoat, and as soon as done it, he went off like a shot. Try to that sandwich. To a sandwich, not to a bag of chips. Mr. Nodo, I believe Gina means the witness. Oh, I forgot about that sandwich. Yeah, it in between the wooden parts of its that boss's trunk. Aha. You mean when they heard a sound like a gunshot and are piled in there? Exactly. He nabbed it from the scene. Goodness. Me and the chief inspector gave the sandwich a good grilling, and you know what he said? I thought it might fetch a good price, and the chip wouldn't be needing it anymore, so... But that's all I did, nothing more, nothing less. Wouldn't you Adam and Eve, the cheek of it, stealing the dead boss's stuff to flog? So Miss Venus wasn't the only one to meddle with the scene of the crime then? Uh-huh. Hey, could they? How could they? Anyway, that's how it happened. And it's a pretty decent trunk, so I figured it might as well make use of it. And there's something wrong with it, huh? Well, maybe you and Mrs. Sandwich should try to find the answer to that question together? I think perhaps the trunk should be turned over to the police, don't you? Yeah, what are you on about? I'm the police. Gina, if you wouldn't mind, could we maybe examine it? Yeah, alright then. Do what you want with it. Okay, thank you. We shall make a detailed record of our examination of the evidence. Dann machen wir das. What's the matter with Toby? Why is he acting so aggressively toward me all of a sudden? Mr. Nodo, be careful! It must be the trunk. Was... Toby, what are you doing? It's gonna lick its face off. Mr. Nodo, Mr. Nodo! Gina, quickly, hail a carriage! Alter, was? 2nd November, 4:57 p.m. Naruto's legal consultancy. Was? Oh, Mr. Naruto, are you alright? Alter, was hast du? Verdammter Hund? Miss Susato? Na, warte mal. Okay, jetzt untersuche ich erstmal das hier. Kann ich das denn aufmachen? Let's have a look inside. Was ist denn alles drin? Look, there's something inside. Oh, let's see. It appears to be a passport, authorizing from the travel overseas. Was Inspector Gregson about to go on a trip abroad then? Perhaps the date of departure might tell us something. That was... Oh, what is it? That was for travel on 31st October, just one day before the incident. What? Really? To France the day before his body was discovered. Okay. Gregson went to France the day before his body was discovered. Interessant. Have you seen this huge gash across the side of the trunk here? It's gone right through the leather and into the middle behind. Gosh, for a metal chest like this have to be so badly damaged. Whoever made the gash must have been struck the side of the truck with considerable force. You know what had happened? Ich glaube, das war das Einzige. Aber warum hat der Hund mich da angefallen? Ah, consider again at last. I believe relief, my dear fellow. After all, to drop dead after a moderate licking by a small terrier must unseemly. What is or isn't seemly is irrelevant here, Mr. Holmes. I'm so glad there's no lasting damage. How are you feeling? I'm fine, thank you. Did you bring me back here? Ah, what is this on my head? A bandage? Sadly, we had no eyes. So that's a compress of sugar water. Sugar water? Don't worry, Mr. Naruto. It's a first aid treatment that my father taught me. Oh, thank you. So let us take tea when you are feeling up to it. But of course, no sugar in the patient's cup. The pump on my head is throbbing sweetly. Enough, don't worry. Hey, maybe you feel ready then? What? What to do? What? Are you alright, Mr. Naruto? It's rather unusual to find ourselves here in the middle of our investigations. It's just occurred to me that I might have forgotten something when we left this morning. Please don't worry, as long as you continue to investigate, surely you won't go far in the wrong. Ah, yes, of course, I must get back to work as soon as possible. Mr. Sherlock Holmes vielleicht reden? Oh. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Holmes. My dear fellow, I think nothing of it. I must say I was quite startled. And I heard that you had been attacked by a dog. For a moment, I feared that infamous murderer of so many had come back from the dead. You mean the professor? Fortunate, I see your prized throat is unscathed. That stiff turned-up collar of yours obviously afforded some welcome protection. Was I that close to death? All I really remember is the dog licking my face over and over again. Well, if you wish to avoid such troubles in future, a little mustard and mustard speed on the cheeks should be the trick. I should think that would balance the sweetness of your bandage rather splendidly. Wenn du das so sagst. Dann moven wir mal weiter. Wohin? Doch dahin. 2. November. Chom's Suite.
Er mit dem Schwarzbiergebot, brodelnd wie ein Feuerberg, den Schlund es mir verbrannt, ach Hopfen deine Wut. Herr mit dem Knacker ich befahl, hat wie ein Diamant den Zahn entzwei, es brach, o über deine Wut. Herr dem Scheid holdlich gelobt und auf den ersten Streich alle Seiten des Teris weh oder an die Wut. Herr mit dem Schwarzbiergebot, brodelnd wie ein Feuerberg, den Schlund es mir verbrannt, ach Hopfen deine Wut. Herr mit dem Knacker ich befahl, hat wie ein Diamant den Zahn entzwei, es brach, o über deine Wut. Herr dem Scheid
Lass sie einfach Deutsch singen.
und auf den ersten Streich.
What on earth is going on here? Am I having a bad dream? Ah, no, it's an old German folk song. Rather a fine rendition, I think. Und auch so ein deutsches Lied im Hintergrund. That's the least of my concerns. Iris? What's the matter? Who's that that relaxed gentleman over there? Iris, she been listening? Excuse me, sir. I do apologize for troubling you whilst you were saying so merrily, but would you be kind enough to explain the situation? Ich glaube, der singt nicht, nein. Well, that worked. A crooning gentleman and a mute young girl. with a tantalizing juxtaposition, and one that appears to have injected the god of deduction within me to find the voices too. Okay, bevor es weitergeht, ich muss mir noch eine weitere Flasche holen. Bin gleich da. So, noch mehr Wasser. Mr. Sholmes, do you mean... The strains of reasoning with me are playing now as a delightful duet. One melody sings of a reunion full of nostalgia, whilst the other has a morose theme about the great secret you're trying to desperately to conceal, Iris. He's turned as white as a sheet. So as usual, we have instantly seen to the very heart of the matter. And by the time my own brief performance is over, I feel sure this gentleman's song will reach its final. So then, to Music Land, where all is sweetness and delicacy and harmony. Pray to enjoy Sherlock Holmes' latest logic and reasoning spectacular. Okay. Dann sag mal. Man's identity. Firstly, we consider the gentleman's nationality. Clearly he is a German, with no grasp of the English language. As evidenced by the German song he sings and his apparently inability to understand when asked to desist. Singt nicht und ich weiß, wer es ist. So, why is the man here at all, and in such apparently high spirits? The answer, of course, Iris, is clearly known to you. Indeed, we need only follow the gaze of those bright young eyes to reveal that particular part of this mystery. The reason of the man's admittedly irritating warbling is revealed by the herbal tea. You obviously offered our German guest a cup of your latest herbal blend. The tea's delectable flavor has made the man's spirits soar, and resulted in this joyful ditty tumbling incessantly from his lips. I eagerly await sampling the flavor myself, and I may join the fellow in a state of elation. Nein, ich glaube nicht. Now to the next question. Who exactly is this gentleman evading himself so thoroughly of the city? As it happens a number of years ago now, a certainly gentleman of German origin engaged my services in solving a particular delicate case. He required the retrieval of letters once sent to an acquaintance that might have proved problematic. In order to conceal his noble identity, he also arrived at my office in a mask. The gentleman's name was Wilhelm Gottreich Sigismund von Ormstein, the King of Germany. If my memory serves, the mask worn by the gentleman is identical. Yes, there can be no question that mask belongs to the King of Germany. It would appear that His Majesty remembers the fine service I afforded him, and has decided to show his face again, masked and all, in order to express his gratitude. A well-mannered monarch indeed, wouldn't you agree, my dear fellow? So the identity of this masked visitor is in fact my former client, the King of Germany. Indeed, his son is currently in London as well, enjoying his wonders of the Great Exhibition. The King of Germany? Wirklich? Okay. Girls, silence. Which leaves us with one remaining imponderable, yes, you, young Iris. But your apparently inexplicable silence is unable to hide the truth. Yes, the reason for your muteness is concealed inside that knapsack. A 5-pound note, I believe, I must say. As your compatriot, I'm deeply saddened. I would appear that you have allowed yourself to be prepped and silenced by His Royal Highness, earning yourself some spending money in exchange for heaping quiet about the king's secret. And now, the final piece of the puzzle. What is the secret if you strive to hide with your silence, Iris? Ah yes, we only need follow that brief involuntary twitch of your eyes to find an answer. You weren't attempting to abscond with that coffee cup. My favorite coffee cup, in fact. Or should I say, the handle of my favorite coffee cup. It appears that His High-Spirited Highness broke it into the midst of this high chinks, which lead us to the sad truth. My favorite coffee cup has been broken by the King of Germany, and Iris tried to conceal it from me. I shall have a bill sent via governmental channels to the German royal family for its replacement. To hide the coffee cup? Thus concludes Sherlock Holmes' great deduction of this painful puzzle. If you silence as well, the fellow's trouble wobbling rather wings in the ears, does it not? Huh. Mr. Holmes, I must say something does rather trouble me. Pray, Mr. Do tell. His Royal Highness doesn't appear to have moved a muscle since we arrived. Ah, and you haven't said a word either, Iris. Mr. Holmes has it alright. You might as well own up to it now. Your reasoning isn't entirely without substance, I must admit. And one other thing, Mr. Holmes. Yet another grievance, Miss Naruto? Surely not. Well, I actually read the story of that case recently, the one you were just describing. And according to that at least, it wasn't the King of Germany, it was the King of Bohemia. Goodness, was it? Yes, that's quite true. Master Gods, the Prince, testified to that in court. In his words, I have come to see the great exhibition all the way from my home in Bohemia. I would ask you to keep that minor error to yourselves. It could easily become quite a scandal. I believe, Mr. Naruto, it is your turn now to make some corrections to a number of minor errors that may have slipped in. Yes, even Mr. Holmes is willing to admit he might be slightly wide of the mark this time, although it's clear that Iris is definitely hiding something. We need to find out the truth behind this mysterious scene. But one truth is incontrovertible, my favorite coffee cup is no more. So, shall we embark again on a joint presentation of Sherlock Holmes' logic and reasoning spectacular? Course correction, hold it, Mr. Holmes. Firstly, we consider the gentleman's nationality. Yeah, okay, Nein. So what? Is some mix of herbs that gives you the urge to sing? Goodness, I shouldn't like to try some. And I'd like to hear you singing, but this man... How long does he intend to keep up with the tune, do you suppose? As I said, he's being stock still the entire time, and if you look closely, his lips aren't moving either. Oh, I'm not sure what's actually responsible for the spirited singing. I suspected the answer lies at the end of the iris gaze. Das natürlich.
Take that!
The reason for the man's medley irritation rambling is revealed by the gramophone. Indeed, for no well-bred gentleman would break into an obscure folk song when making a social call. In other words, this gentleman isn't singing at all. In fact, it would appear that the fellow is unconscious. Ah, the music seems to have stopped now. I ask you, Mr. Naruto? Yes? Why would I have purchased a recording of that gibberish? How should I know? Well, never mind. On with the deduction. Who exactly is this gentleman availing himself throughout the settle? Bestimmt nicht der König von Deutschland. Man dachte ich, der Watson, weil er genauso aussieht fast. Wilhelm Gottreich Sigismund von Ornstein. Nein. Although we have already established that it was actually the King of Bohemia, it seems Mr. Schaum's intend to persist with his Germany theory for some reason. Come to think of it, the young prince was wearing a mask as well, wasn't he? Master Gotts, the boy who you had in tears? Don't remind me, or anyone else. Do you suppose all members of the aristocracy of mainland Europe wear masks? I'm sure they do, well, probably. Anyway, the point is that mask doesn't belong to any king. No, that's right, as we well know, because we can't identify the true owner of this mask. Over there.
Take that!
Yes, there can be no question that mask belongs to Kazuma Asori. In other words, my memory is simply unreliable. Only you could try to make that sound positive. Kazuma's mask has been languished on this metal chest for several days, although that doesn't explain why the gentleman is wearing it now. But now it's now a simple matter to determine our guest's true identity. After all, the gentleman is unconscious. We need only excuse ourselves in advance and lift the mask appear beneath it. Ja, na klar. I don't believe it. Father! I'm afraid, Mr. Toto, you must be Mr. No, I think not, Mr. Sholmes. Then it would appear our logic and reasoning has once again revealed the truth. This mysterious visitor is my unconscious father, Chujin Mikotoba. Logic and reasoning, or just looking and saying? Yeah. Nur hingucken. Which leaves us with one remaining imponderable. Yes, you, young Iris. Sie haben bestimmt nicht, oder? Die Tasse kaputt gemacht? Das kann es vielleicht sogar stimmen. But that's a £5 note poking out from Iris' knapsack, is it? Oh dear, I can't be sure. Most money that we encounter is a coin form. I know, I'm not even sure if we've seen any banknotes here in Britain at all, have we? But anyway, Father would never have paid money for Iris' silence. He certainly seems like the silent type himself though, judging by his present state. Must be some other reason for Iris' silence, I suppose. That's what Iris is trying to so hard not to give away with her eyes. Something entirely different. Aber was ist denn das dann? Metal chest? This metal chest, it contains important documents, doesn't it? Yes, details of all cases Mr. Sholmes has worked on over the years. Written up by Iris' father, if I'm remembering correctly. Iris insists that the chest is kept locking at all times. She never once shown me inside. Well, its contents are invisible to her, I suppose. Entirely irreplaceable. Look at it now. The catch is unlocked for once. Oh, so it is. Oh, that's hard to ignore. Very. I've never seen the chest unlocked before in all the time. I've been staying here at the Baker Street.
Take that!
Yes, the reason for your muteness is concealed inside the metal chest. An excellent observation for upon closer inspection. There is something different about the chest's appearance. It kept locked at all times, yet now the catch is open. Evidently, this has something to do with your refusal to speak, Iris. It is simple enough matter to incite you to speak, I'm sure. I really need to open this chest. Here we go. No! Hurry, don't! Mr. He's dead. Cool. Never. Oh, Hurley, I told you not to open it. Okay. So I found your voice now, Iris. Oh. In other words, what just happened clearly reveals the truth here. Yes, the real reason for your silence until now is somewhat different to the usual dance of deduction you perform with Mr. Sholmes. Well, he left me alone on the ballroom floor, so I'm going to have to dance this next part solo. And anyway, I need to get to the bottom of this for my own peace of mind. Now then, Iris isn't definitely the silent type, so... You mean you don't actually know the answer yet, despite the annoying point of the finger before? Mr. Dotto, sometimes a man needs to point his finger first and think later. Oh, well, if you say so. Simply would be better examine the Iris more closely and try to rescue the situation then. Oh, was ist das denn? Oh, the key.
Take that!
Yes, the real reason for your silence until now is the key behind your back. When Mr. Sholmes was thrown into the air before, just before you called out to try to stop him, you slipped something out of your mouth. That something is the key now in your hands, no doubt the key to the chest. You're so clever, you know. So now it becomes clear. Thanks to Mr. Sholmes' graphic demonstration, we can well imagine what happened here. Professor Mikotoba also opened that metal chest only to be punched into the air and land sprawled onto the seat. But wait, that doesn't explain other facts. What about the stylish scarf and the cup of tea? And above all, why would he be wearing Summer's mask? Well, for those curious details, I can think of only one explanation. Clearly, an unbelievable miracle took place in this room. Isn't that right, Iris? Consider how the room was arranged before the whole painful experience took place. When Professor Mikotoba opened the chest, completely unaware of what waited him inside, the mask was flung into the air just as he was, only to land neatly on his face when it fell back down. And the teacup journeyed through the air and ended with sword in the unconscious Professor's fingers? What? 9? Was? You mean to say that the stylish scarf is actually just a tablecloth? It's the Great Detective's office, after all, a place of miraculous deductions. Would you expect anything less? Yes, you're right. It happened exactly as you said. Brilliant, Bruno. This concludes Ryosuke's Naruto's Great Deduction of this punchy puzzle. Okay. So then, why don't I make a fresh pot of tea for us all?
Objection!
An admirable performance, Mr. Naruto. But in the final act of the show there, you rather missed everything of importance. Mr. Sholmes, if you would cast your mind back to my earlier deduction. Iris, clearly you are hiding a great secret. She is, from the look on her face. Mr. Sholmes must be right, whatever the great secret is. The cat isn't out of the bag yet, so I put it to you again. You were attempting to abscond with that coffee cup. It is a shame about Mr. Sholmes' cup. It must have been smashed with Professor Mikotoba's opened chest. Oh dear, so many things seem to have been broken here. Now that the deduction has taken a different direction, Iris doesn't seem to be trying to hide the broken cap anymore. In other words, the great secret is anything else. Let's put out our observation skills to work here for one final time then.
Take that!
We were attempting to abscond with this case file. Iris, as you know very well, nothing escapes the attention of a great detective. Oh no. We visited Scotland Yard's autopsy laboratory earlier today, and Dr. Gurry informed us that the autopsy report of Clint Van Seeks had gone missing. Clint Van Seeks? Yes, I do seem to recall. But some years ago I asked to see the report in question. You were with me, weren't you, Iris? You mean it was you, Iris? So those papers you have there are... I'm sorry. Forgive me. Oh man. To hide the case of file. To hide the case file. Deduction complete. In truth, I would like to have thought I could have predicted the bobby-trapped chest, but it caught me completely off guard. I was very nearly delayed consulting Detective Sholmes. I'm sorry, Hurley. So you mean this autopsy report really is... Yes, it took it from the lab, even though I knew it was very important. Was there something that troubled you, Iris? Not exactly something that troubled me. Something I'd been looking for. And I saw this report, and I saw the writing in it. I knew it was Daddy's. The writing? Your father's writing? What do you really mean? Iris, it must be something that's hard for her to talk about. Forgive me for interrupting, my dear fellows. Mr. Sholmes, what is it? feel as though the poor unconscious gentleman on the settle has been somewhat forgotten. Oh, father. Perhaps we should find our guest somewhere more peaceful to rest. Mr. Naruto. Yes. Would you be so kind as to let him your bed? He must do our very best to make him comfortable, I feel. Oh, yes, of course, I will help you carry him up. So I will. No, I can manage alone, thank you. You have tea to enjoy. We wouldn't want Iris brew the stew. Because there's no better way to make the professor comfortable than dragging him upstairs like a trunk. I wonder, perhaps that was deliberate. Maybe Mr. Sholmes making himself scarce to give Iris a chance to talk more freely. We must use this opportunity to talk with Iris. And find out what's going on. Would you like to tell us about it, Iris? About your father? I'm sure I told you before, didn't I? That Daddy used to be Hurley's partner. Yes, and that note about all the cases they solved together are kept inside that metal chest. And that's right, Hurley told me, you see. He said that Daddy's somewhere far away now. You can't meet. That's one way of just describing it. Then, when I secretly unlocked the chest and read through the papers inside, I started to build up a picture in my head of what Daddy must be like. Well, that's only natural. You are just like any other girl of your age. I read that Daddy was a professor of medical science, so I studied and took my degree too. Well, that's only natural, I suppose. In that respect, you are not quite like any other girl of your age, though. But there was one thing that I could never find out. Daddy's name. His name wasn't anywhere on any of the notes that he had made about his work with Hurley. But then one day... That's what happened, is it? You saw this autopsy report, you finally managed to work it out. Is that right? Yes. So it was the handwriting in the report that sought her eye. When I saw the writing in the report, I could hardly believe it. I know that handwriting. I thought to myself, but it was the same as the writing you'd seen on your father's case notes? Exactly. I was desperate to compare the two properly. I needed to see them side by side. I asked the doctor in the laboratory, but I was told I couldn't take the report anyway. And even worse, I was told that was the first and last time we had allowed to even look at it there. You decided to steal it? When I compared the autopsy report with the case notes I had here, there was no doubt. The handwriting was exactly the same. It was Daddy's. And the signature of the coroner at the bottom of the autopsy report? Read Dr. John H. Wilson. So that's how I finally found out. I learned Daddy's name, at last. I see. Ever since then, I've called myself Iris Wilson. And that's also when I had the brilliant idea of writing stories all about Daddy's exciting times with Hurley. I decided there and then that I would write the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Oh, Iris, I had no idea the stories had quite such a deep personal significance for you. I can see why the autopsy report was so important to her now. And why she was prepared to break the law to get her hands on it. I must apologize, Iris. It's really all my fault. Hurley, I made a promise, you see, that until the time was right, I would keep the details about your father a secret. Alles, was ihr bestellt habt. Ach so, PC-Sachen oder so. Ja, dann ist nice. Dann ist nice. Freut mich. Ich habe mir auch Pokémon Mystery Dungeon bestellt. Ich auf jeden Fall auch nochmal hier streamen möchte. Auf jeden Fall bestimmt nice. Wird dann morgen ankommen. Aber was anderes. Ich habe die dann privat mit nämlich in der Workshop. Warte, was? Okay. Okay, dann freue ich mich schon mal drauf. Mal sehen. No, was? I take the autopsy report back to Dr. Gurry and apologize, I promise. Yes, we will go together, I think. Then, let me look after it for you until we get there. Ja. Ja, auf jeden Fall. Das ist echt ein nice Spiel. Bringt so ein bisschen Erinnerung von früher wach. Was report of the final victim? Professor. Ja, okay. Must go and water my herbs, I think. I will see you later. Poor Iris. She must be feeling awful. I know Mr. Sholmes is here for her, but still. Was? How? What's the meaning of this, Mr. Sholmes? Mr. Sholmes? Oh dear me. So, you noticed, I see. But that would mean... Warte, was steht da drin? Warte. Autopsy report. Coroner John H. Wilson. Victim cleaned when Sikhs. British. Time of death. Okay. Observations. Death from a single stab wound to the heart. Other superficial external wounds indicate of a duel. Duel. Additional notes. Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring finger. The right hand, but no document and corresponding ink was found. This findings vital evidence recovered from the victim's stomach during autopsy report. Credit to Inspector Gregson for petitioning to judge for the autopsy procedure. Was? What on earth is the matter, Mr. Toto? You have turned as white as a sheet. It's this autopsy report, Mr. Naruto. The one from 10 years ago. The writing isn't Dr. Wilson's at all. Huh? What do you mean? How could you possibly know that? Because I know this writing very well. It's von Ihrem Vater, oder? This writing is my father's. What? Professor Mikoto's? Indeed, it's true. And now you think, you know, my dear fellows? No, I don't know anything. What on earth does all this mean, Mrs. Jones? Was the idea that slowly forming in my mind? Just too extraordinary to believe. Please, you have to explain. Nein. Warte. So, this autopsy report was actually penned by Professor Mikoto then? But that makes no sense, it's not possible, surely? Not possible, my dear fellow. Pray, take a deep breath and think again. Yes, you're right. And in some ways, it actually makes a great deal of sense. It does. 10 years ago, it was when Father returned to Japan after his extended study tour in Britain. And prior to his return, where was Dr. Mikoto engaged? Ah, of course, he was assistant in Dr. Wilson's laboratory, learning about forensic science. And as an assistant, he would have aided with the dissection work, making detailed notes, which would be assembled into the full autopsy report. Once the work was complete, the head coroner would check the contents and put his signature on the document. In other words, the only writing of Dr. Wilson's in the report would be his signature at the end. I see. Iris got the wrong end of the stick, you mean? He saw that and assumed the whole report had been written by Dr. John H. Wilson. Which is very understandable, of course. What a complicated situation. Thinking about it, most of what we know about you, Mr. Sholmes, comes from the published stories of your exploits. Yes, the adventures of Sherlock Sholmes, written by Iris. And we really have no way of knowing what's fact and what's fiction. Most troubling for you, my dear fellow, I'm sure. What about the supposed partner of yours? Did he really exist or not? Ah, you have come straight to the point, I see. And please come straight to the answer. I believe Iris explained it in one of her installments. He was a trusted comrade, and the only person I could truly have called a friend. And did this partner of yours truly make a record of all your cases? Are his notes really stored inside that metal chest? Absolutely, my dear madam, absolutely. So, where's your partner now? We rarely met. You see, he lives on the other side of the world. But if this autopsy report and the records of all your old cases were penned by the same hand, and if the autopsy report was written, though not signed, by your famous partner, there would be only one logical conclusion. Pray impress me. Your partner would have to be Juji Mikotoba? In other words, Miss Susato's father? On my word, Mr. Naruto. Yes? You are coming along wonderfully. You have hit upon the method at last. You have finally acquired the art of deduction. You mean to say... Allow me to introduce you to my great friend and partner, Mikotoba. Professor Mikotoba? Does this mean that you are the real Dr. Wilson? No, my dear, I'm still my old self, Chuchi Mikotoba, your father. Of course. This is obvious too much for Susato-san to take in. I must say, though, how my old friends has attained worldwide celebrity as a great mystery solver in the greatest mystery of all. I still remember the first time we met. Pray remind me, when was it again, Mikotoba? 16 years ago, Sholmes? Yes, right, 16 years ago. We just arrived from Japan with Seshiro and Genshin. I was in charge of lodgings close to the hospital, some comfortable rooms at a reasonable price. But rents are devilishly high in that particular area. That's right, so I decided you needed someone to share lodgings and expense, and was fortunate enough to be introduced to Sholmes, who found himself in a similar situation. I was a clever fellow back then, a mere shadow of the great detective you see before you now. I was working at the hospital's chemical laboratory at the time, indulging my curiosities for little gain. And the situation of your cooperation led us pursuing cases together, you see. I do believe it was a mere 6 years, with a great many adventures. But the last year of Mikotoba's stay in Britain, the most infamous of cases presented itself. The case with which you have become rather familiar yourself, the Professor Killix. After the trial, Seshiro and I were summoned back home. Hardly surprising, given the circumstances. So, there you have it. And as you know, all details recorded by my trusty chronicler remains in that metal chest. This is just amazing. Professor Mikotoba really is Mr. Sholmes' famous partner. Father, goodness, my dear, what a cutting look. As your daughter, I'm very proud to learn that you were the great detective's great partner. But nevertheless, there's another mystery that I really must ask you to explain now. And that is... You know very well what it is. The unresolved matter of Iris's father. Of course, I almost forgotten about that one. I should have seen this coming, I suppose. Iris told us that all the notes about the great detective's adventures that are in that metal case were written by her father. Is that correct, Mr. Sholmes? Yes, indeed. It is told as what I told young Iris. But if you are Mr. Sholmes' father, and you wrote all these case notes, then Iris's father must be you. Ah! Oh my word, Mr. Zato. You are coming along wonderfully as well. You too have hit upon the method at last. You have finally grasped the art of deduction. What you have always told me, father, that my mother died when I was born 16 years ago, and you left me in grandmother's care whilst you embarked on your study tour of Britain. And I've always accepted that. But what is about Iris? Oh, there's it. So the son's ice cold stare. No, hold a minute. It was very complicated. I mean, it's really not what you think. Then perhaps I'd like to explain exactly what it is. There's it. Now the eyes go from ice cold to red hot, just before she... No, really, you've got the wrong end of the stick. Sholmes, say something, man. That's well enough, my fiery fellows. Mr. Sholmes, when did you get all this out? As I don't like to interrupt this exciting exploration of the past, Weitere and I have an urgent matter that requires a short excursion. But it's very late, Mr. Sholmes. Where must you go? Why, my dear madam? Is that not obvious? My partner and I must pursue our natural nemesis. So, get your coat, Mikotowa. The game is afoot. But Sholmes, I really must give Soto a full explanation, I think. Later, my dear fellow, later. Our carriage awaits downstairs already. You haven't changed one iota, have you? I mean, really, I visit our home after 10 long years, and when I open the chest in a fit of nostalgia, I quite inexplicably pass out. And as if that wasn't enough, when I eventually regain consciousness, I'm plunked straight into all this. Father, please, go with Mr. Sholmes now. But I've no doubt that whatever happened, you were acting in everyone's best interest. I trust you completely. Susato. And sending the great detective and his great partner of Andrew adventures together is more than I could have hoped for in my wildest dreams. Very well done. We will speak again later. So, I believe your own work is done for the day. I wish you the best of luck for tomorrow. Yes, Naruto, good luck in the battle, and in reaching the decision. A decision? What, better to go back to Japan, I suppose?
So much happened that day that I barely knew what to do with myself. It would only be later that I'd come to realize how amidst the chaos I'd unleashed were all the clues I needed to finally unearth the truth. And that all the turmoil was necessary to give me the resolve to see everything through.
Was and? What? Warte. Warte. What? Das war Episode 4? Okay, ich dachte, da gibt's noch Ein Gerichtsfall, aber anscheinend echt okay. Final Chapter bin ich jetzt. Cool. Dann, eigentlich wollte ich noch kurz vom Prozessfall aufhören, aber anscheinend ist die vierte Geschichte zu Ende, obwohl der Fall noch nicht mal zu Ende ist. Aber gut. Ist es. Dann mache ich erstmal hier Pause. Und esse erstmal was. Oh. Oh. Und genau, dann gucken wir mal wegen später. Okay. Dann will ich mal kurz hier den Stream und dann werde ich heute Abend bestimmt wieder was machen. Dann bis zum nächsten Mal.